All right, I'm here with Shawn Wells, the rainmaker in supplements, also known as the ingrediologist, best-selling author of the energy formula. Shawn, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me on, Joel.
Hey, I wanted to, before we even get started and talking about your book and how amazing that is and just all your knowledge in supplements, I thought it'd be cool just to start off with kind of your story, because I was really surprised when I look at you, and I'm sure anybody looks at you, they're like, this guy's like super successful. He looks great. He's in great physical health. And yet it wasn't always that way.
No.
Can you kind of explain just kind of your journey of like health and like you had like Epstein-Barr virus, you had a pituitary tumor, you had 2 cervical disc removed. Like it wasn't always easy.
No. I grew up in a chaotic home and a lot of bullying, a lot of issues, depression, suicidal thoughts, anxiety. I became morbidly obese and a junk food junkie, just, seeking solace in the Oreos and the Lucky Charms and all of that kind of stuff. I was never good at sports. I was good at school, but, it was hard to focus and believe in myself. I, turned to being the class clown as a way to deal with the depression and deal with the bullying and getting picked on. If you can't beat them, you might as well join them, kind of thing. And it wasn't until I got to college and I started working out, reading these magazines, the bodybuilding magazines, and using creatine that had just come out. My body started transforming. I started getting into all the supplements. I would spend literally 4 hours in a GNC just reading the magazines, looking at the labels, thinking these things are the magic bullets to change my life. And I did get a lot of change and benefit from them, but I was putting pretty much every dollar and every hour I had into all these things. And, some of them worked, some of them didn't. And I ended up going to my physician for a routine physical in between sophomore and junior year in college, and he saw how much I was evolving and changing, and my attitude, my body, and I was telling him how excited I was about supplements, and he drew out this lifeline between 20 and 80. I was 20 at the time, and he said, why not be happy between here and here?
Whoa.
And it he had no reason to do this, other than he just felt called. And that really changed my life path. I was in school for business and I was like, I want to do this for a living. I can see doing this. And I remember at the time, in the bodybuilding magazines, this guy, Dr. Marv Hoyer, was at the Muscle Tech Labs, and he had this lab coat on, and he was their formulator, and I was like, this could be cool, I want to do this. And he ended up being a friend and mentor later on, and wow. It's really cool. But I've always pushed myself, I've always been driven, I've had a lot of insecurity, a lot of imposter syndrome, and even though I chose that profession and started heading down that path, I was still relentless on myself. I was still a perfectionist. I was still my own worst critic instead of my own best champion. If anyone talked to you you talk to you, you wouldn't be their friend. It's I was brutal to myself, and always playing out scenarios and playing out conversations that were just had. What did that mean? Why did they say that? And I was someone that was working 80 hours a week. And it was just driving me into the ground between that and the negative energy I was casting upon myself. And I still had body dysmorphia, no matter what shape I would get in. At one point, I went from 300 pounds to 150 pounds. I was anorexic, very, disordered eating, body dysmorphia. Even there, I never could get thin enough. And even when I was working out for 4 hours a day, twice a day I was working out 2 hours, I was orthorexic. I was addicted to working out, and I had to get my protein immediately after my meal, after my workout, or else I'm going catabolic, and all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got into plant medicine, honestly, a few years ago that I really had my big shift. And yeah, to your point, like I still, because I was pushing so hard, because I was this driven entrepreneur, because I was like, yes, getting my credentials and getting on stage and, you know, doing all these amazing things, working with all these researchers, formulating all these supplements, patenting all these ingredients, traveling the world. It seems perfect, but I was still hurting.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started getting into plant medicine that I really had a shift that I could, in fact, love myself. And I think up until a couple of years ago, I was really like looking for external validation as love, to
Yep.
validate me. And, whenever it's external, I just never really got it. Like when I got it, it's fleeting,
Yep.
either from people or from my accomplishments. If I got on, Ben Greenfield, it's like, well, great. Well, now you need to get on Joe Rogan. It's like,
Yeah.
it's never like a, you made it, kind of thing. It's or
Yeah.
like really celebrating the wins. It was always like, okay, you did that. Now what's the next thing? Let's go. And so I had lots of health issues through all of that. Like you said, with Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's. I was in bed for 6 months, inflamed, in pain. My body hit a wall. Then yeah, I had 2 discs replaced in my neck and a brain tumor. And I've been through it mentally and physically. I've been on the edge of suicide many times. I cover that in my book, the energy formula, along with all the biohacks and supplements and all the cool
Yeah.
things. But I make the book personal, just talking about some of my journeys too, and what I've done and learned along the way. And the biohacking stuff is what kept me alive. But it's still like I was like operating at the base of Maslow's pyramid, and it wasn't until like I did some of the plant medicine work and facilitation work, integration work, that I was able to evolve, love myself, and kind of transcend up that pyramid more towards self-actualization. And I'm so much happier now as a result.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I mean, I do a lot of weight loss coaching and just health coaching, and there's always an emotional component behind it. Always. And it's so funny you say that because I think some of those same things, like I have some of those same issues, right? Like
Hmm.
um, that self-worth. Like, am I good enough? Can I charge this much? And it's funny because I think some of that also has been great for me because it's helped grow me. It's
Hmm.
continued that self-growth. But
Hmm.
at the same time, if you're not addressing that and wondering like, hey, why do you have that self-worth? You're going to always have these issues. And it sounds like now, for the first time, it just sounds like you're really. What I get is this sense of you're just being. You
Exactly.
don't have to have anything. I'm just being, and life is beautiful, and things just come to you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think in our world right now, we're very driven towards this masculine energy of doing, where
Yeah,
like our accomplishments are our identity, right? And there's not as much about who you are as a person and the state of being. And I love you for who you show up as, not what you do. It's like the first question you ask someone is like, "Hey, what do you do?" It's like,
right.
it's like, "How much money do you make?" It's like it's all in that state of doing, and of course, there's value to that. I mean, this world turns as a result of that, but the feminine energy of being is something I think the world needs now to heal from so much of the over masculinized energy that's in the world right now, and in that state of being, or in the state of accomplishment and doing. So agreed.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot of times there too about plant medicine. Is
Mhm.
there, and I know it's different for everybody, but is there one that you really found that was really transformational? There's so many out there, ibogaine and
Right.
ayahuasca.
Yeah, so ibogaine would be great if you have like a chemical dependency. Just to mention a few, like ketamine is amazing as a legal one, especially if you have PTSD and you're working with a facilitator, a therapist. It's great as a dissociative because a lot of times we identify with our trauma. And when you
Mm,
can dissociate the trauma, then you can move past it. Like you can see it apart from yourself. Otherwise, like with all of these things, the ego is constantly deflecting, suppressing, It's great at protecting us. The ego has a purpose in kind of creating these constructs and stories, but at the same time, it's preventing us. So you just have to be aware of that. And when you're in plant medicine, there's ego dissolution. It's turning off the default mode network. And when you're in that space, that's when you can create massive change and move past trauma. And that's what we've seen with studies around MDMA, psilocybin, and ketamine that are all being used clinically, pharmaceutically, when it's with assisted psychotherapy. They're seeing like in 3 to 6 sessions with any of these things that people are moving past their traumas, which is amazing. But I think ketamine is really powerful when it comes to PTSD as that dissociative. And then, for me, and then MDMA is great, like as a heart opener. I think that's great with relationships in particular. That was originally how it was developed, like with relationship counseling. So I think like with a couple, it could be transformative. For me, probably the most transformative that I've used the most is psilocybin. That's powerful. That's when I had this first experience about I can love myself. And I had the realization, and it does, like you say that, you can say that. I can say that to you, you can say that to yourself. But again, the ego is deflecting, suppressing, whatever. It's not until you actually feel it that you can have change. You can say something, but it's not until you really feel it and anchor it in your heart and in your mind that you can move through it and change. So another realization I had in that space was that I can be anything I want to be at any given time. Like just because I've been pushing down this path, I don't have to stay on that path, and I don't have to stay heads down to accomplish it as quick as possible. I can just divert and just be whatever I want to be that day because it makes me happy. Just seeking your happiness, like chasing what lights you up, like those were realizations I had in the space too. And again, it sounds obvious. It sounds like Instagram, posts that you just swipe by, but they're life-changing when you actually feel them. And so for me, psilocybin was a game changer. I ended up doing probably about 30 journeys on it. Wow. Definitely improving neuroplasticity, and allowing my brain to the neurons that fire together wire together over time. And like Michael Pollan talks about how you're skiing down these tracks, and you keep skiing down the same ski tracks over and over and over, and they become hardwired. They become the only tracks. And these plant medicines are essentially like throwing fresh powder over that trail, and now you can blaze your own path, maybe even go down a path you had never seen before, never would have thought to go down, because of this ability to be divergent in thinking in this space, right? And you're far more creative in this space. So it allows for that. And then one of the other plant medicines that I really love that's been transformational with it is San Pedro, also called Wachuma. It contains mescaline. It's not really like hallucinogenic, and we would do it like the next day, like all day. And what it does is kind of like, it puts you like imagine if you were like a Buddhist monk that had been trained for 30 years on how to like turn off the monkey mind and just be hyper present. Like that's what this medicine does. Like you're just super present. There's nothing else. There's no other distractions. There's no other worries or concerns. There's no you're not thinking about where you need to be in an hour, or what's on Instagram. You're just like, when you're looking at someone, you're so full on in that conversation, and including nature or whatever. And so it allows you like the day after a journey to process and integrate. And so that's been a beautiful process. And then recently I did ayahuasca in Peru, and that was powerful. That one's a heavier one, but a transformational one too. And each journey was very unique. I had one that was super blissful and loving and being held by the universe, and then I had one that was more difficult, but I love those too because you learn how to navigate these scenarios, and that has so much application to your day-to-day life. Like the difficult one came up, I needed to like get in my body and breathe, and then my mind said, if you don't like this, then change this picture, change what's on the TV. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I do have sovereignty, I do have control. Let me change what I'm seeing. Let me reframe. And then it becomes a lesson in how to navigate through situations that are uncomfortable. And that's powerful. So I'm
Yeah.
so thankful to the work that I've done in plant medicine.
That's incredible, man. Thanks for sharing that because, we were going to talk all about just your background is, supplements in and out. And the book, that's what I was expecting to get, your new book, The Energy Formula, that's what I was expecting to get. And everything you're sharing is just so much more personal, and there's just so much more going on. And it sounds like, man, you might have another book to come out with.
I'm working on
everything it. On plant medicine. I mean, how transformative. Wow, people need to hear this. So this is very cool.
Thank you.
But let's talk some supplements because I know that's what people want to know about. You do a great job in the book just outlining, and I always get these questions like, what's a good brand? So, like, if I ask you that, if someone comes up and asks you, like, hey, Shawn, like, what's a good brand? Like, how are there, like, a couple, 1 to 3 brands that just stand out on you? And if so, like, why are these trusted brands? Why can we kind of trust these?
Yeah, I think the brands that are healthcare practitioner approved, that don't use proprietary blends, have been around for 20 plus years, have established quality control standards and personnel, that have been tested many times through Consumer Reports and Labdoor and some of these third-party companies and always come out good. These are the companies that I would recommend. Are there potentially new companies that are on Amazon that are good? Sure, but the companies that I would recommend are the ones that I know will be here 10 years from now and are going to test out now and 10 years ago and 10 years from now. So it's companies like Thorne, Designs for Health, now Life Extension Foundation, Doctor's Best, Standard Process, companies like this that are just like really solid formulations that again, like healthcare practitioners trust. That the extra time has been taken to test these ingredients out, the extra thought has been put in and what ingredients go into it, and the forms and the dose and the plant parts and the genus and species and all of it. So those are the ones that I would recommend.
Very cool, and I'm glad because like a couple of those brands, like you mentioned, you can get them on Amazon now, Life Extension, and Doctors, the Doctors one you mentioned, they're actually like pretty cheap and affordable. And sometimes I think people associate, cheap means it's probably not good, but no, these are good. These are good brands, so that's good to know.
Yeah, and here's news to use. I'm working on this with some partners right now that some of these products that are Amazon choice are not necessarily good products, and they can not test out like to the tune of maybe like some of the tests I've seen, like they're like 1% of like what they claim.
Yeah.
So, there are products that might be cheaper than a Now or a Doctor's Best, but I would lean on, these brands that are excellent brands to avoid those kind of situations.
Yeah, cool. And then here's another question I get all the time. Multivitamin, good or bad? Some doctors just say it's expensive pee. I hear other functional medicine practitioners, naturopaths, they say, no, absolutely. You need multivitamins of some sort. The soil has been depleted. We're not getting enough minerals and nutrients. We're not getting that from our food, and there's so much toxicity in the world that you need some multivitamins. So what are your thoughts on that?
I disagree on the expensive pee, especially like if you're getting an optimized multivitamin. And so, what does that mean? That means like getting the methylated B vitamins, so things like these B vitamins that are in their active forms. They don't need to be converted. And that means for B12, like methylcobalamin, for B6, P5P, for folic acid 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, sometimes called methylfolate. And like with folate, for example, there's 4 enzymatic steps to get to the active. And sometimes there's deficiencies in someone's body to get there. So they could take enough folic acid, but may not have enough the active form that's actually doing something. And that's where like that MTHFR gene comes in, and people are doing testing around that. But those are important. And then I would also say that the more organic forms of the minerals, so things like the amino acid chelates of the minerals, like things like glycinate, or the Krebs cycle intermediate forms of the minerals with like citrate or malate, those are going to be much better than like oxide or carbonate. But I would still say with a multivitamin, I would take on top of that, like a vitamin D that's in the oil form. I would take magnesium. There's probably not enough in the multivitamin you're taking, and most people are deficient in both of those. So those are some that I would take on top of a multi. But yeah, I think like Thorne has a multivitamin Elite, I believe is the name. That's a really solid product that I would take.
Very cool, man. Thanks for clearing that up.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, your book, it's called The Energy Formula. You talk a lot about energy in the book, and so that, and that's the key foundation. If you can't make energy, if your mitochondria is not working, you're not living to your fullest. What are some tests or that you would have people run if someone came to see you as a client? Like, what are some big like tests that you'd have them run to kind of just give them a good gut check of like where they're at and what they can improve?
Yeah, I think the 2 most important in terms of like health, aging, disease potential, and mitochondrial function would be looking at glycation and inflammation. So looking at hemoglobin A1C, which is a longer term indicator of blood sugar status, which normally we only look at if you're a type 2 diabetic, which is crazy to me. And especially when 87% of Americans are metabolically dysfunctional. And that means you're heading down this path of type 2 diabetes / insulin resistance, of faster biological aging over chronological aging. You're heading towards 99% of diseases that are not inborn genetic diseases, but metabolic diseases, including cardiovascular disease, cancer, Parkinson's, just on and on and on, coronary heart disease. All of these things are metabolic in nature. And so we have to look at our glycation, which is blood sugar damage, which is how long that blood sugar is hanging around in the body, and therefore how long insulin is staying elevated. And then also looking at inflammation. So a marker called CRP, C-reactive protein, is going to be great as well. These are going to be 2 markers that you're saying like, what's going on with my body and how likely are we heading towards disease and faster aging through these 2 means. I also, like if I was to go beyond that, I could look at oxidation, which is another form of damage with oxidized LDL. Can look at vitamin D status. Like I said, I think that's very critical. Vitamin D ends up being just literally across the body. It has so many purposes. It's not just a vitamin, it's a hormone. In gut health, in immunity, in sexual function, in insulin sensitivity, depression. Like there's so many aspects to vitamin D. And then probably lastly, for cardiovascular health, I'm not a big fan of cholesterol as a marker in general, of looking at HDL or LDL. LDL isn't the quote-unquote bad cholesterol. That's like complete myth. And total cholesterol is kind of a myth. Like the cardiovascular marker that really stands out for me is something called lipoprotein A. And that's really associated with cardiovascular disease. It's one of the best markers to look at. So those would be a handful of ones I would look at, and you can also head into like ferritin and some other things too that might be good for aging as well.
Awesome, man. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to get your opinion on your top stress supplements. Obviously stress was a big indicator in your own health.
Yeah.
Like, Which ones do you think, and there's so many out there, right? Ashwagandha, CBD. I've tried CBD. It personally does nothing for me. I've done higher doses, didn't feel a thing. Like, are there some top ones that you've really seen to like really move the needle and kind of help out?
Yeah, so I mean, along those lines, I actually do think the cannabinoids can be potentially potent. It just depends on the person. It's that the whole endocannabinoid system is really underappreciated as the master regulatory system, and there are potential deficiencies for people, and that's where like mood disorders and joint pain and inflammation can come up as a result of cannabinoid deficiencies. And no one's really studying that. There's no doctors of that. So it could be like that maybe you need CBN and CBG at X dose and X time. And, that's where you're going to get the benefit. It's hard to say. Like some people, like try CBD and, if it's isolated, they don't get benefit. If it's in a blend, they do. If they tried at 10 milligrams, they got no benefit. But 100 milligrams, they did, It's hard to say, it's so bio-individual, but I do think it's worth exploring. Beyond that, I think the adaptogens are so powerful along this front of just what's called, with stress, allostatic load, essentially your stress bucket size and how hard you are to kill. And so the bigger your stress bucket, the more capacity you have to deal with stress. And when I'm talking about stress, I'm not just meaning like stress at work, mental stress. This is physiologic stress. To your body, it's all the same. Like it's difficult for your body to deal with a stressful stimuli of any type, whatever that is. And that can be, what's called hormetic stresses that can be eustress, positive stress, like cold plunges and hot saunas and fasting and keto and, working out with weights. These are all stresses. And they can be positive hormetic stresses that help you adapt and grow stronger. Except when your bucket's overflowing, especially when you have a small bucket of allostatic load, then these eustresses, these hormetic stresses, become distresses. So like if you had just lost your job, just got divorced, whatever it is, and you're trying to do fasting and you're trying to work out and you're doing cold plunges, it can actually be counterproductive. And this is where something like HRV, heart rate variability, can be helpful at like assessing your readiness to train or take on stress and how recovered you are. So the greater the variability, the greater your capacity for stress. And that's something to be aware of. So adaptogens are going to help normalize you and put you in a place of greater resilience, a greater capacity for stress. So things like ashwagandha, rhodiola, ginseng, schizandra, maca, these things are all going to help you with your resiliency and your capacity for stress. Rhodiola and ashwagandha are probably my two favorite. Those are ones that I rely on quite a bit. And I mean, they're amazing because when you increase your capacity for stress, you're going to like feel more focused and alert and sleep better. You know what I mean? And recover better. So it's like, it's both. And that's what's amazing about these herbs. And that's why you see like them be the most legendary herbs when you go culture to culture. You go to like Asia and it's ginseng. You go to Russia and it's rhodiola. You go to India, it's ashwagandha. You go to South America, it's maca. Like these herbs end up becoming the most important herbs in these cultures.
Yeah. What about I can't even say that word. You know what I'm trying to say? Phosphatidylserine.
Yeah, phosphatidylserine.
You like that one? Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the phospholipids, along with like phosphatidylcholine. They definitely have benefit in increasing your phospholipid, what's called bilayer of the cell membrane, and we have zillions of cells, and so obviously that's important. But also phosphatidylserine, like you're saying, has been shown to improve the cortisol response and lower stress. So I think absolutely if you have elevated cortisol levels, and that seems to be a problem, that phosphatidylserine could help. But also, plant medicine and therapy could help there. There's a new study that shows just even one use of plant medicines in general, just one use, and they saw 33% less type 2 diabetes and 33% less coronary heart disease.
Wow.
And it's all related to the stress reduction. When you are not suppressing trauma, the body holds the score, right? Like the body is like holding on to trauma in a number of ways, and you're suppressing it and trying to stay distracted from it, not like wanting to deal with it. And it's being held in your body, and that stress is like a constant nagging stress, and there's a constant nagging inflammation that's just there. And like when you actually move through something like this, you see it, you feel it, you deal with it, you move past it. It's like the body is lighter and functioning better as a result. You know what I mean? Inflammation goes down, the stress goes down. So that can be powerful as well.
Yeah, huge. Thanks. You have a great chapter on exercise on the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're a big gym rat. There's a lot of people that I coach and I work with, they just don't have the time to be in the gym 45, 60 minutes, whatever it is. For those people, like, what do you think is like the big bang for your buck when it comes to exercise?
Okay, there's a few things. One, if you go to energy, I'm not even like a plugging type of person, and I really don't sell anything. I'm not an affiliate for anything, but if you go to energyformula.com, get my book. I have it in Audible, ebook, hardcover, 400 pages, full color, 60 full color diagrams, surveys, stacks, the best devices to get. I also have a hidden chapter on natural movement. And in that hidden chapter, I go through a lot of this new data on exercise snacks. It's this new term. This is really cool. That if we move our body every 5 minutes, every hour for 5 minutes throughout the day, that they've shown that it actually has a greater impact than going to the gym 5 days a week. And what's happening there, and I'm not saying to not go to the gym, and I'll get to like some hacks there in just a second, but what I'm saying is that we're so sedentary that it's not just an equation of calories expended. It's taking a toll on our body in terms of lymph and blood flow and how our body needs to be moved and shouldn't be staying in a seated position. The body actually ends up reshaping its muscles, and especially the fascia and bone. All of that's remodeling all the time. And if you're in a seated position, essentially almost the entire time you're not in a laying position in bed, what do you think your body's going to do? And it's not going
that form.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So, just moving your body like for the 5 minutes an hour by doing air squats, planks, sit-ups, crawling, rolling, whatever, like ancestral movement even, right? So those things are going to help dramatically your health. And, I think that's even more important than going to the gym. Now, going to the gym is very important. Resistance exercise, huge. And they've shown that grip strength is like one of the number one correlates to like how long you'll live. Because it's a sign of your strength. It's a sign of your muscle innervation, that you know how to use your muscle and recruit the muscle. So that becomes very important. And when there's like healthy muscle mass, there tends to be healthy bone mass that's supporting it, bone mineral density. So you're not aging with muscle loss called sarcopenia, or bone loss called osteopenia or osteoporosis. So that's important. But as for the gym, which I do go often, and I do like to train with weights, I like to do a few things. There's high intensity interval training, which I go through in the book. I think the data is powerful. In the least amount of time, you get the biggest bang for your buck. You only need to do it about twice a week. An example of this is like with sprinting. This would be sprinting, maximally, and then taking 30 seconds, and walking or jogging depending on your ability, and then sprinting again, and maybe doing this like 6 times. This is really going to like ramp up the body. When you're training towards maximal, that's where you're going to get adaptation. When you're doing low intensity, steady state cardio, you're just burning calories. It's great that you're moving the body, it's great that you're burning calories, but you're not going to get adaptation when you're training at 40, 50% of your capacity. When you're training at 90, 95, 100% of your capacity, that's where change happens. And that makes sense, right? So,
like you said, make yourself harder to kill.
Exactly. Some other hacks that I have in terms of strength would be, I got several to stack here. It's going to be time under tension. It's going to be the cell swelling theory, and it's going to be kind of max volume. So what I would do here is, if you want to like really collapse your time, there's 3 different training methods. There's going to be doing drop sets so that you can do max volume in the shortest period of time. And that's like just getting in like one of these pulley systems that has a weight stack and just moving that pin, lower and lower and lower as you exhaust. The next thing is it's called intraset stretching. And that would be like where, like let's say with curls, and make sure with curls, speaking of time under tension, that you're not like resting up top or resting on the bottom, that you're not bouncing up top or bouncing at the bottom, that you're controlling the movement and going through the full contraction. And at the bottom, your bicep is fully stretched, right? You actually can, in intraset stretching in between your set of curls, you're going to flex your triceps as hard as you possibly can. That will fully stretch the bicep. And now it has even more time under tension. And so when you go back into your curls, your bicep is like further exhausted. And if you're stacking this with drop sets, this is like really exhaustive. And then the last thing that you can do to even further exhaust it with research is something called blood flow restriction, where you're wearing cuffs like around the top of your bicep, or if you're training legs, it would be like near your groin. And you're using these tourniquet cuffs, these fast tourniquets you can get for like $8 on Amazon. You can buy really expensive blood flow restriction training straps that are 10 times the price, but these work great for me. And you get the tension on them to be what would be like a 7 or 8, where you're restricting venous blood flow, not restricting arterial blood flow, which is deeper. So it's more of the superficial blood flow. So you're not turning anything black here. This is just literally cell swelling, very similar to like when you're on your 4th set and you're just like swollen and you're just exhausted and your muscles are pumped and there's just no more to give. You can get there much faster by doing this blood flow restriction training. So you stack these up and woof, you get a heck of a workout. Probably the last one that I'll mention that I really like too is something called static contraction. So again, let's go back to curls. And this is one where you just like imagine yourself on a preacher curl and you're holding the weight and you hold it as long as you possibly can. And then you're controlling that negative slowly as it comes down. This is exhausting. And literally you'll feel this burn for the next few days. But they've found that the eccentric is where the majority of the hypertrophy or muscle remodeling / growth is happening, is from that eccentric part of the movement, the negative part of the movement. So it's actually the lowering. So there's some of these devices, these home devices that are all concentric. I think that's terrible. It's really what's important is the negative is going through the eccentric, the lowering, the controlling the movement. Like that's where strength is really happening. That's where innervation is really happening. That's where the hypertrophy is happening to the muscle. So those would be a handful of things that I mentioned in the book.
Yeah, those are amazing. And you know what? You mentioned the book, not to plug it, but you have, and I have to say, the best photos. I don't know how you did it or who you did it with, but just your graphics, they're they're my like go-to for like referencing, and I'll send photos to clients and just send them that.
Yeah, it was full
Phenomenal.
color. It was very expensive. The book is like everything I did is at cost. Like I think I like make $2 on that book on the hardcover.
Yeah.
It's $40, but like it's literally a hardcover, and every page is full color. Tons of graphics. I wanted it to be more like these DK books that are at the bookstore, just like really like a pretty book, a book that's like a reference, like almost like that you would get in college, or something like that you can keep going back to. I have like a lot of bullet points, a lot of chapter summaries. Like it never gets too deep, and you can open up any page and just learn something.
Yep, that's what I love about it. And you have all the supplements like highlighted in blue. It's really well done.
Thank you.
You mentioned in the book 1 in 10 Americans are currently in optimal metabolic health. You mentioned it earlier, just it's 87% have metabolic issues. So, and one of the great supplements that I never really leaned on and until you mentioned it was berberine. Other than that, like what would you say for top like weight loss supplements? And I really hate to say that because you got to put in the work at the end of the day. There's way more to that. But if people are just looking for ways to stack on what they're already doing, what would be your top ones? I'm sure berberine's up there.
Yeah, berberine, or in the countries where you can't get dihydroberberine, like outside of America, take berberine, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. Dihydroberberine, dramatically better in terms of bioavailability. I'd take about 150 milligrams of dihydroberberine twice a day. So that's definitely my number one. I think the polyphenols are really powerful for anti-aging, for metabolic health. Things like curcumin, fisetin is a new one that's getting a lot of research and discussion. I'm a big fan of that one. EGCG, some of these things, resveratrol, pterostilbene, they're all pretty good. I think quercetin is one of my favorite of all of those. I think I'd put that on top of the heap. So really quercetin and fisetin are probably my 2 favorite polyphenols, and curcumin, and I've been working on its metabolite tetrahydrocurcumin, is really great when it comes to inflammation. So those would be some of my top ones. Other ones for metabolic health, grains of paradise. Really interesting. Interesting one because it increases brown adipose tissue. And most people may not know that there's this highly metabolic fat-burning fat on their body. And brown adipose tissue, called BAT, is mostly around like your scapula and your collarbone. You only have about maybe 6-7 ounces on your body. And we thought this was, just for mice or just for babies, because it's brown because it's highly dense with mitochondria. It increases thermogenesis, meaning creating body heat. And before a baby has the ability to shiver, which is how we can create body heat, they have this brown adipose tissue that's highly active to generate heat. But now we're finding that people that seem to have like that metabolic advantage, the people that can eat whatever they want kind of thing, the holy grail, if you will, of staying lean, it tends to be that they have more active brown adipose tissue and higher numbers of these adipocytes. So now there's a lot of research going on how do we increase BAT, how do we increase its activity, how do we do what's called now is Beijing white adipose tissue, the typical fat we have, and turn it into something more metabolically active. So there's a lot of research going on right now. Cold plunges increases BAT. Grains of paradise and possibly some other compounds like cayenne, ginger, some of these compounds that are spicy in nature seem to have this effect on this vanillin receptor. But in particular, grains of paradise, really low dose, only 40 milligrams, has been shown to do this, to burn about an extra 100 calories a day. We don't know like what it does in combination with cold plunges in 80 milligrams a day, at twice a day. We just don't know. But I'm feeling like it's significant, and even 100 calories a day without stimulation is something, right? That adds up over time. So combining it with cold plunges, that would be pretty amazing to do. Cinnamon, especially like the actual cinnamon, which is Ceylon cinnamon. Most of the cinnamon that we get in our food sources and our supplements is not true cinnamon. It's not the Ceylon cinnamon that's higher in these polyphenols. So I would get true cinnamon. So those are probably my two favorites when it comes to blood sugar. So again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before with looking at glycation and inflammation. So now that's what I'm talking about here, is looking at glycation and inflammation to control biologic aging, to control our likelihood of disease, to reduce insulin and blood sugar.
Love that. All right. You're the supplement guy. Bring the rain. If you could only pick 5 supplements, what would be your top 5?
Okay. All right. Wow. Let me think about it.
No, you probably. By the way, can you tell everybody you probably have like 70 online?
Yeah.
Like your,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Literally. That's literally probably about how many I take. And even when I travel, I probably take at least 25.
Yeah.
So, number 1 is dihydroberberine, which I was just talking about. I think, it's berberine outperforms metformin. Metformin's the number 1 anti-aging drug in history. And dihydroberberine dramatically outperforms berberine. So that's my number 1.
Wow. That's huge for people that didn't realize that one. Wow.
Number 2, I'm going to go with butyrate, in particular this form tributyrin. Butyrate is the postbiotic. So you take your prebiotics to make more probiotics. Probiotics ultimately make this postbiotic called butyrate in the gut. Butyrate content in the gut is what's driving a lot of your gut health, your immune health, your neurotransmitters, your hormones. There's more neurotransmitters in the gut than there is in your brain. So more dopamine, more serotonin, more GABA. All of this is higher in the gut. So butyrate, and in particular this triglyceride form, is more bioavailable, called tributyrin. I think is really a powerful driver, again, of anti-disease, anti-inflammation, anti-depression, etc., and can't be underestimated. Vitamin D is going to be next. It's not the sexiest thing, but man, I think about, again, with vitamin D and magnesium, which will be my next one.
Yeah.
About 80% of us are deficient in and are so critical to our health. On so many fronts. Vitamin D, like I mentioned before, and I would take it with K2. So D3, K2 in the oil form. And with magnesium, I would just take magnesium glycinate. It's one of the cheaper ones, but highly bioavailable. Works great. And again, we're talking about 80% of the population is deficient in it. Last one I will choose. Let's see. I'm going to go with, I'm actually going to go with, besides a multivitamin, which is going to cover a lot of things. And again, I would take D3 and magnesium on top of a multivitamin.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's really close to being in a multivitamin and should be thought of this way is actually creatine. And people think creatine is for muscle power, muscle strength. And it is. There's 500 studies that show that it is, and it's great for that. But beyond that, it's a great methylator, which means it protects our DNA, it protects us against cancer. But also we see that it's protective in bone mass, in reproductive health, with the testes in particular, and ovaries. We're seeing the eye health. Bone, like I said, bone health, also brain health. With traumatic brain injury, we're seeing that it helps with the energetics and recovery of the brain. So there's a lot going on there. And then again, going back to how important muscle mass is as we age, it's critical. Grip strength is a number 1 predictor of how long we live. And bone mineral density is essentially directly correlated to how much muscle mass we have. The more muscle mass you carry, the denser your bones are. And the more that you're using your muscle and moving your muscle and contracting your muscle, the more the bone has to be involved in this dynamic movement. And again, there's like constant remodeling that's happening. All of this stuff is turning over constantly. People think like bone is static. It's not. None of this is. There's crosstalk between muscle and bone. There's crosstalk between muscle and fat. There's crosstalk between muscle and fascia. They're interacting with each other. They're remodeling together. They're talking to each other. So all of that's really important. And to have exercise where it's moving and being challenged is really critical. And I think creatine becomes a massive predictor of how well we age.
Phenomenal. Thanks, brother. Yeah, creatine, that's one of my stacks, but I think about it as the neurotropic effect and then just some of the muscle building, like you said, but I did not think of it in that light. So that's huge. Thanks. I'm looking up at the time and we're running on the hour and I know you got to run. You want to jump into some lightning round questions?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. If the old you could see the new you, what would the new you say?
The old you could see the new you. Wow. I went through this with a hypnotherapist. This just brings to mind this really powerful exercise that I did with him where I went back to a traumatic moment from my childhood. And, I did that thing where you hug the child and say, I love you and whatever. And I was crying and all that. But he asked me, like, what does that child think of you? And it was the first time in my life I was proud of myself. I wasn't seeking external validation. I gave that to myself because I was like, he's blown away. He's just blown away at what Shawn's accomplished, like at everything he's done, the number of lives he's impacted, like the book, like the travels, the patents, the ingredients, the formulations, all of it. Like it's so impressive, and it's like something I've never given myself. Like I said, I was always just on to the next.
Yeah.
And to take that moment and have the little child in me blown away by the man I am, that was pretty cool. So that just comes to me.
Love that. Thank you. What are some choices that you think that you made that made you who you are today?
Going back to, I don't actually regret all the drive and the hurt and the insecurity and the imposter syndrome and perfectionism. Like, it did serve a purpose. Like, I am here. I am highly accomplished. It's just, it no longer serves me. It's no longer where I want to be. And so I think, like, not shaming myself over those things that's important, and actually having pride over the drive I had and just resigning it to that and saying, yep, that served me. I did a great job. But, and I no longer want to be there. And I think now the mindset that's really helped me shift is just granting myself grace and not allowing, myself to get stuck in perfectionism or, these loops that play over and over in your brain, and just saying, yep, that's what happened, moving on. And I'm learning to reframe that everything's either winning or it's a lesson, and therefore it's winning. So I'm winning or I'm winning. Like, I don't view anything as a loss or, I screwed up, or like all the creative genius comes out of like the quote unquote screw ups. So like, I'm out to screw up. I'm out to play. I'm out to like stumble. I'm out to, find a way that's different than everyone else. And that's that divergent thinking.
Yeah. Love that. You're such a force in the health and wellness world. I'm curious, like who's someone that inspires you?
Oh man, a guy I just started working with, Jim Quick, I think is really amazing from mindset. I love his stuff. Really a great guy to follow. There's a guy that's he's living down in Costa Rica, and I'm actually going to be checking out property down there on Instagram called Guided by Walter. And when it comes to like mindset and consciousness, this guy is phenomenal. I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday, like The Obstacle's the Way. I mentioned that a lot in the book.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is kind of mindset driven, because I think that's where like everything starts. Like I said, all the biohacking was just keeping me alive, but it wasn't until I shifted my mindset and had gratitude and love for myself, that the biohacks like were actually augmenting.
It worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any I'm a big reader. Any books that you would recommend that had a huge impact on your life that you think others would probably benefit as well?
Yeah, the biggest one for me was the Four Agreements. Like I go back to it once a year. It's powerful, especially on you know, my tendency to people please, and
Yeah, me too.
realizing that, you know, people are projecting out on me all the time, and I'm projecting on them, and I've learned that I'm good with who I am. I'm good with you know, projecting out the positive aspects of myself, that I do, you know, some of the Four Agreements, like I do my best, you know, that I put out the best version of myself. You know, I just, the Four Agreements are so basic to life and living a happy life that I feel like it's essential for all of us to look into.
Yeah, that's a popular one. And let's not forget the energy formula.
Oh, 100%. Tons of stuff in there.
Yeah. Last two questions, then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Any rituals or hacks or just practices that you try to do on a daily basis?
Here's one that might surprise you or your listeners, that's practically free and would change your life pretty dramatically, is mouth tape. Taping your mouth, especially when you sleep. You know, even if you're not a snorer, even if you're not apneic, we tend to breathe through our mouths, and it's not optimized for breathing. The temperature isn't right, the filtration isn't right, the hydration isn't right. It causes inflammation in the airways. You're not getting as much oxygen to the tissues. We're meant to be nasal breathers. And the other time I would tape your mouth that's not bedtime is exercise. And yes, this would look weird if you're at the gym, but like maybe if you're, you know, by yourself running around out in the yard, or like, you know, lifting weights in your garage or something, getting used to the idea of not gasping for air through your mouth and training yourself to breathe through your nose and recover through nasal breathing. You'll find that over time, it takes a while, you know, whether it's the sleeping or the exercise, it'll take a while to retrain yourself. And you don't have to do this forever after the retraining. But you'll see that you'll recover faster, you'll feel more refreshed faster. And then I'm trying to think of one other one. Maybe I really like getting red light. That's one I've been experiencing lately, that I feel the difference from when I do red light in the morning, or especially at night. I feel like my inflammation does go down. I feel more recovered. I think that's a big one. It's not hard to do, and you can stack that with something else. You know, you can read a book, you can listen to a podcast, you can wind down, and have the red light on.
Yeah, love those both. Last but not least, Shawn, where can people find you?
So, ShawnWells.com, I have all kinds of newsletters and guides and all this free content. I don't ask for anything. It's just tons of cited, free, amazing content like I always do. At Shawn Wells on Instagram, and it's SHAWN. I have tons of infographics and my top supplement stacks and a lot of content that you'd really like. Energyformula.com is where you can find the book, and I have like recipe guides, this fasting for energy guide, a hidden chapter on natural movement, all kinds of cool stuff there. And then I'm on, you know, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So just, hit me up wherever. If you have a question for me, probably Instagram DM is the easiest thing. I answer all my questions personally. So that would be great. And I appreciate you having me on, Joel.
So cool. Shawn, thanks for being on the show, brother.
Thank you. All right. See ya.